Part One of The Ethical Engineer by Harry Harrison. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Reading by Greg Marguerite. Part One of The Ethical Engineer by Harry Harrison. That mores is strictly a matter of local custom cannot be denied. But that ethics is pure opinion also? Maybe there are times for murder and theft and slavery. All nature is but art unknown to thee, all chance direction which thou canst not see, all discord harmony not understood, all partial evil universal good. And, spite of pride, in erring reason's spite, one truth is clear: whatever is right. Alexander Pope, Essay on Man. Chapter 1. Jason Dinalt looked unhappily at the two stretchers as they were carried by. "Are they at it again?" he asked. Brucco nodded, the scowl permanently ingrained now on his hawk-like face. "We have only one thing to be thankful for. That is, so far at least, they haven't used any weapons on each other." Jason looked down unbelievingly at the shredded clothing, crushed flesh, and broken bones. The absence of weapons doesn't appear to make much difference when two Pyrrans start fighting. It seems impossible that this damage could be administered barehanded. Well, it was. Even you should know that much about Pyrrus by now. We take our fighting very seriously. But they never think of how much more work it makes for me. Now I have to patch these two idiots up and try to find room for them in the ward. He stalked away, irritated and annoyed as always. Jason usually laughed at the doctor's irascible state, but not today. Today, and for some days past, he had found himself living with a persistent feeling of irritation that had arrived at the same time as his discovery that it is far easier to fight a war than to administer a peace. The battle at the perimeter still continued. Still, the massed malevolence of the Pyrran life forms were not going to call a truce simply because the two warring groups of humans had done so. There was battle on the perimeter and a continual feeling of unrest inside the city. So far there had been very little traffic between the city Pyrrans and those living outside the walls, and what contact there had been usually led to the kind of violence he had just witnessed. The only minor note of hope in this concert of discord was the fact that no one had died, as yet, in any of these fearsome hand-to-hand conflicts. In spite of the apparent deadliness of the encounters, all of the Pyrrans seemed to understand that despite past hatreds, they were all really on the same side. A distant rumble from the clouded sky broke through his thoughts. "There is a ship on the radar," Meta said, coming out of the ground control office and squinting up at the overcast. "I wonder if it's that ecology expedition that Brucco arranged, or the cargo ship from Ondion." "We'll find out in a few minutes," Jason said, happy to forget his troubles for the moment in frank admiration, since just looking at Meta was enough to put a golden edge on this gloom-filled day. Standing there, head back, searching the sky, she managed to be beautiful even in the formless Pyrran coverall. Jason put his arms around her waist and exacted a great deal of pleasure from kissing the golden length of her upstretched throat. "Oh, Jason, not now," she said in exasperation. Pyrran minds by necessity run along one track at a time, and at the present moment she was thinking about the descending spaceship. With a quick motion, scarcely aware of her action, she pulled his hands from her and pushed him away. An easy enough thing for a Pyrran girl to do, but in doing so she half fractured one of his wrists, numbed the other, and knocked Jason to the ground. "Darling, I'm sorry," she gasped, suddenly realizing what she had done, bending quickly to help him up. "Get away, you lady weightlifter," he growled, pushing aside the proffered hand and struggling to his feet. "When are you going to realize that I'm only human, not made of chrome steel bars like the rest of you people?" He stifled the rest of his words in disgust at himself, his temper, this deadly planet and the cantankerousness of its citizens that was scratching away at his nerves. He turned and stamped away, angry at himself for taking out his vile mood on Meta, but still too annoyed to make peace. Meta watched him leave, trying to say something that would end this foolish quarrel, but unable to. The largest blank in the Pyrran personality was an almost complete lack of knowledge of human nature, and her struggle to fill in the gaps she was only just beginning to realize existed, was a difficult one. The stronger emotions of hate and fear were no strangers to her, but for the first time she was discovering how difficult and complex was this unusual feeling of love. She let Jason go because she was incapable of any other action. Of course she could stop him by force, but if she had learned anything in the past few weeks, it was the discovery that this was one area where he was very sensitive. There was no doubt that she was far stronger than he, physically, and he did not like to be reminded about it. She went back into the ground control room, almost eager to deal with the impersonal faces of the dials and scopes, material and unchanging entities that possessed no conflicting problems. Jason stood at the edge of the field and watched the ship come in for a landing, his anger forgotten temporarily in the presence of this break in routine. Perhaps this was the ship full of scientific eggheads that Brucco was expecting. He hoped so. It would be a pleasant treat to have a conversation with someone about a topic more universal than the bore dimensions of guns. With practiced eye he watched the landing, which was a little sloppy. Either a new pilot or an old one who didn't care much. It was a small ship, so not many people would be aboard. Then the spacer turned for a moment in a landing correction, and he had a quick glimpse of a serial number and tantalizingly familiar insignia on its stern. Where had he seen that before? The ship touched down and the flaring rockets died. There was only the click of cooling metal from the ship. No one emerged, nor did any of the Pyrrans seem interested enough in the newcomer to approach it. That must mean that no one had any business with it, and, of course, no curiosity either, for this, along with imagination, was in very short supply on the war-torn planet. Since no one else was making any moves, Jason went forward to investigate for himself. A stingwing that had escaped the perimeter guards dived towards him, and he blasted it automatically with his gun. The corpse thudded to the ground, and the soil churned about it as the insectile scavengers fought for the flesh. Only bare bones remained by the time he had taken 2 paces. A muffled whine of motors told him that the lower hatch was opening, and Jason watched as a hairline crack appeared in the thick metal, then widened as the heavy door ground outwards. Through the opening he had a glimpse of a figure muffled in a heavy-duty spacesuit. That must be Meta's work. She would have contacted the ship by radio while it was on its way down and explained the standing orders that no off-worlders were to be allowed out of their ships unless wearing the heaviest armor. Since the armed truce between the human inhabitants, there had been a lessening of the relentless warfare of the Pyrran life forms waged against the city, but only to a slight degree. Deadly beasts still abounded, and the air was thick with toxic diseases. A stranger unprotected would be ill in 5 minutes, dead within 10, or much sooner if a horndevil or other beast got to him in the interval. Jason felt a justified pride that he could walk this planet under his own power. The natives, adapted to the deadliness and heavy gravity since birth, were still his superiors, but he was the only off-worlder who could stand the dangers of Pyrrus. His gun whined out of his power holster into his waiting hand as he searched for some target to use his talents on. An armored piece of nastiness with a lot of legs was crawling into hiding under a rock, and he blasted it neatly with a single shot. The gun snapped back into the holster and he turned to the open door of the spacer, his morale greatly improved. "Welcome to Pyrrus," he told the ungainly figure that clumped out of the ship. There was a hefty maser projector clutched in the armored gloves, and whoever was inside the suit, the face was invisible behind the thick and tinted faceplate, seemed exceedingly nervous, turning to look in all directions. "Don't worry," Jason said, fighting to keep a tone of smug satisfaction out of his voice. "I'll take care of things for you. I don't know what kind of horror stories you may have heard about Pyrrus, but they're all true. That's a nice looking heat ray you have there, but I doubt if you could move fast enough to use it." The figure lowered the gun and fumbled for a switch on the front